This is part 8 in how to build $1 billion startup almost overnight. And we're going to discuss the concept of Glocal, which is obviously local plus global. And no better way to explain it than with craft beer. I will give you a perfect example. When I was in college, God, this dates me a little bit, but Coors beer was regionally distributed. And some of my college friends would just go absolutely nuts in wanting to drink Coors beer because they couldn't get it. And so in fact, they would have friends ship in Coors beer to Texas from Colorado. And so that is a perfect example of building a business from a local origin into a global type of a play. So what happens is, if you have a XY, okay, graph, so this is Y size, and this is, let's just call it market B for beer. Right, what you're going to do is you're going to build it locally first. So you're building these local elements of your idea, and obviously the craft beer is a very good example. In fact, I was at Sprouts and I bought this beer out of, it's Inversion IPA, it's out of Bend, Oregon. I can assure you that probably my favorite beer when it comes to IPA is actually Sierra Nevada's Torpedo, but I kind of ran out of that, so I'm using this as an example. This is actually not a bad beer. And so what happened is that, or what happens is that a lot of these smaller businesses in some sectors or some industries will build it locally, and then they'll slowly expand. Now what really helps is if whatever the sector they're in, the sector itself is expanding. So for instance, craft beers is a sector that's expanding at a very rapid pace. In fact, I can tell you this, and I have been all over the world, and I've had different various types of beers across the world, and I'm gonna shock you right now. In my opinion, and I'm European, and I'll still say this, in my opinion, Americans right now are building the best craft beers in the world. And it goes from Sierra Nevada as an example, to Dogfish IPA, to Inversion IPA is a really good product too. And so what happens is that as the market, let's say it's a craft beer market, is expanding, then a lot of these startups are building high quality craft beers, and they're controlling the quality of it. They're adding a lot of flavor to it, and they're growing locally, and then what they're doing is they're going from local to regional, and regional could be state, it could be a larger area, it's all relative, and then obviously they're going national, and then the last thing to do is go global. Now, whether you go global or not, or Glocal, it really depends on so many different factors. So for instance, Samuel Adams, I think is a really good beer. Obviously they were a regional brewery, and then they expanded, and in fact, in my opinion, when it comes to national distribution of beer on a more of a mass market scale, I would say that Samuel Adams and Sierra Nevada are probably the best beers in America today. Of course, you have some really cool smaller craft beers out there, and there's a huge variety of them right now, like Dogfish, for example. In fact, in Dallas, there's a really good beer called Deep Ellum Brewery, and they have some really good IPAs. But bottom line is you grow it locally, and then with the sight that maybe one day you're going to become a global brand. Now, whether you get there or not is an interesting story. It depends on a lot of different factors. But this is a perfect example of a startup going from local to regional to national to global. And you know, when you look at, for instance, even Anheuser-Busch, if you look at the history of Anheuser-Busch, of course they started local and then they expanded from there. And so from that perspective, this is how you should look at your business as well. Now, this example can also be used for any type of an industry. I think a great industry to look at is fast food. if you consider or if you look at the McDonald's as an example, the history of McDonald's, they were a local, everybody starts with one, and then they expanded, and then they became a global brand some years later. And and the way they did it was actually through franchising, which is a topic of my next discussion on fractal markets, and they are somewhat related. The difference is how you scale it, but you could also look at this from a coffee perspective. If you look at Starbucks obviously rode a huge wave, and they went from a local regional coffee shop chain, and then they expanded regionally, then they expanded nationally, and now they're about to, they're going global. In fact, when I was in Hong Kong, one of the good things was that I found the Starbucks right next to my hotel and didn't lose out on my Starbucks cup of coffee every day. So that's how I want you to look at it. Start small, that's one way to do it. Fine-tune the formula, fine-tune the value proposition. Hopefully you're in a market that's also accelerating, that's going to give you the benefits. Of course, one of the negatives of going this route of slowly expanding is that you could have a competitor check out your formula and say, wow, this is a really cool concept. I'm just going to copy it and expand into the markets at a national level much quicker. And you might have the case of that, for instance, like even when it comes to craft beer, you're seeing now majors come in and start developing IPAs, but in reality what happens is that certain type of consumers refuse to buy national beers, probably one of them. We want to buy domestic, we want to buy local, and we also want to buy high quality beer. So when it comes to from that perspective, the local beers do win out. The case is, what do you do and how do you expand into regional markets and national markets? And I think a perfect example is Samuel Adams, of how successful they've been going from a local, regional to a national brand. So you may want to study the success of Samuel Adams. Cheers. It's good.